Before I read you something that is going to make you angry, I need you to understand why we're here. There are two futures coming with AI. Both of them are bad. Both of them end with most people unable to work, unable to provide, unable to feed their families. First future, simply put, is that AI gets so good it does everything. I mean, the accountant can't compete with the AI that never makes mistakes. The paralegal can't match AI that reads 1,000 cases a second. And the designer, they watch AI create a year's worth of work in minutes. And jobs disappear. Not because people aren't skilled, it's the skills themselves have become obsolete overnight. The second future is worse. And that's where AI gets so good that anyone can make perfect business plans, perfect business strategies, flawless marketing campaigns, and comprehensive project proposals. All plans they have absolutely no idea how to execute. So people fail over and over. And they watch others succeed with knowledge they didn't have, with frameworks they were never taught, with access to advisors and capital they can never reach. And the gap between planning and doing becomes a chasm. Chasm. I don't know how to pronounce that word, but most people fall into it. And both futures happen because of the same problem. A knowledge gap. A gap between people who know how to think about a problem and people who only know how to think about answers. And this gap is why fear works so well on us. And what I'm about to read proves it. This paper was written by Carolyn Wilkerson. She's a student at the Northeast Alabama Community College. She wrote this for English Composition 101, a basic composition course. And she saw something most people with expensive degrees miss their entire lives. And Carolyn is now helping us build the solution to the problem she identified. Listen to what she wrote, and then I'll tell you what we're building together. The fear effect. Throughout history, fear has been one of the most powerful tools used to control human thought and behavior, shaping societies more effectively than reason or truth ever have. Today, that power no longer lies only with kings or dictators. It lives in the language of news anchors, politicians, public figures who understand how easily fear can control the masses. Online, fear multiplies as people pass it to each other like a contagion. When people see the world through fearful eyes, suddenly, their actions mutate from natural instinct into a weapon of control. As Dillard and others elegantly put it, fear creates harm at the individual level that may interfere with the ability to perform one's job or successfully enact social relationships and degraded psychological well-being. People must learn to recognize and resist fear-based manipulation because it suppresses independent thought, shapes mass behavior, and maintains power through obedience. Fear limits people's ability to think critically and rationally, and mass media uses that to its full advantage. Dillard and his colleagues found that media exposure can sustain and intensify fear, creating what they describe as a spiral of fear. This research on coverage of the Zika virus reveals that constant news reports and public discussion keeps the idea of danger alive in the public's mind, even when they try to avoid such content. This cycle of exposure traps individuals in a continuous state of alertness, where emotional reaction replaces independent thought. In this way,
The media is not only a source of information, but also a mechanism that reinforces fear and consequently makes the public more easily influenced. This tactic is evident in how the media operates during election campaigns as well. In interviews, Donald Trump frequently labeled COVID-19 the Chinese virus, using what Lopez called strategic racism to stir resentment and warrant retributive policies. While Trump's phrasing referenced the virus's geographic origin, the media's repetition of the term exaggerated its emotional weight. By broadcasting the label endlessly, news outlets helped transform a statement of origin into a narrative of blame that fueled public fear and othering toward Asian communities. Trump then used the public's fear of the virus and presented them with a scapegoat in order to twist the narrative and justify increased control and punitive policies. The media's willingness to broadcast and sensationalize these claims demonstrates how fear-based coverage can blur the line between information and manipulation. Beyond politics and media, religious authorities have wielded fear to control behavior for centuries. Lopez explains that pastors and religious leaders often use fear to establish authority and maintain control over congregations. By emphasizing concepts like eternal punishment, religious messaging conditions followers to comply with moral standards out of dread rather than genuine understanding or belief. For example, the fear of perpetual hellfire shapes individuals' sense of sin in ways that reflect the institution's priorities more than personal spiritual values. Rather than promoting love, compassion, or moral growth, the fear of divine judgment becomes a tool of social control that restricts independent thought. This reliance on fear is not exclusive to any single religion or denomination, but it is a common pattern wherever religious institutions prioritize obedience over personal reflection. Fear also operates at the political level, where governing bodies harness public anxiety to justify invasive policies. Dillard and colleagues suggest that fear-based messaging, particularly in relation to public health or national security, often serves the goal of intimidating some or all of the citizenry. By presenting certain issues as existential threats, political leaders create a sense of urgency that bypasses critical analysis. The citizens, gripped by fear, become more likely to accept restrictions on personal freedoms or the expansion of government surveillance. This dynamic appeared in response to events like the September 11 attacks, when heightened fear led to policies like the U.S. Patriot Act, which expanded federal surveillance with minimal public resistance. This ability to frame fear as protection allowed for a significant reduction in civil liberties, illustrating how the consequence of fear-based manipulation is that it reduces people to emotional reactors rather than thoughtful participants. Dillard and his colleagues observed that when emotions are more important than facts, the public becomes vulnerable to misinformation and propaganda. Fear inhibits the mental effort needed to analyze information critically, making individuals more likely to accept simplistic explanations or scapegoats. This cycle of fear and manipulation has real consequences. It undermines democratic participation. It stifles dissent. It perpetuates systems where power rests with those who control the narrative. Breaking this cycle requires more than awareness. It demands education that teaches people how to think, not just what to believe. Only then can individuals recognize fear-based manipulation for what it is and reclaim their capacity for independent thought. Only then can reason reclaim its place over fear. Carolyn wrote that last paragraph. Breaking this cycle requires more than awareness. It demands education that teaches people how to think, not just what to believe. She's right, but she couldn't have known how right she was. Here's what most people don't know. There are frameworks, but they're worthless without someone teaching you how to use them. And that's the knowledge gap. 98 out of 100 people on the planet do not have access to these frameworks. Not because the frameworks are hidden, because the education needed to understand them in every $160,000. That's the average cost of an Ivy League MBA, and that's by design. The people that have access to these frameworks, they make money from those who don't. 1,000% markups, 5,000% markups, 10,000% markups in every industry, every transaction, every single day. With AI now, with AI, that gap is about to become catastrophic. Because AI doesn't care if you have frameworks or not. It will help you make perfect plans that you can't execute. Perfect strategies that require knowledge you don't have. And so you fail. But the person that sold you the tool, they make money. And the gap widens. Right now, billions of people are doing work that AI is learning how to do. Field workers scouting crops for pests, paralegals reviewing documents for discovery, analysts drafting reports from data, line operators adjusting machines, and customer service reps solving routine problems. These aren't bad jobs. These aren't bad people. The skills themselves are becoming obsolete. But their work is becoming automated. And when that happens, they need to transition, not to different jobs, to different ways of working, from producing outputs to governing systems, from doing the work to teaching AI how to do the work, from execution to oversight. This transition requires frameworks. It requires education. And unless we build that education, those millions of people are going to fall into that gap. That's why we're building Framework-edu. It's part of a larger platform called Brave On. Just one part, the education part. Cultural framework-based learning, ages 3 to 18. All subjects through trigonometry and philosophy. But here's what makes it different. We build our materials into the child's culture. A Navajo kid learns about math through fishes and bears and traditional patterns. A French kid, they learn from examples with bread and cheese and eggs and historical context they understand. We're not teaching everyone to think the same way. We're teaching everyone how to think. The frameworks are universal. The examples are personal. And here's why this matters. When you send a child away from their culture to learn, you're telling them that their culture isn't good enough. When you force them to learn through examples they don't understand, you make the learning harder than it needs to be. When you make education expensive, you're creating a knowledge gap on purpose. Framework-edu changes that. It's in your language. It's in your culture. And it teaches you how to think about problems. Not what answers to give, how to approach the questions. So let me show you what I mean. Here's a framework they teach you at Harvard Business School. And it costs about $100,000 a year to learn there. And I'm going to teach it to you right now for free. It's called the 4-question framework. And it works in almost any business decision. Question 1. What are you trying to accomplish? Question 2. Who's stopping you? Who's stopping us? Question 3. What are our options? And question 4. What's the next step? What's the best next step? 4 questions. You can teach this to a 10-year-old in 5 minutes. But people pay $100,000 a year to learn this at Harvard. Why? Because it's not about the question. It's about learning to ask that question reflexively. All day. This situation. It's about, like building a habit of structured thinking. That habit with AI. That's what separates the people that get hired to solve problems from the people who they are the problem that needs solving. Most people will never learn that framework. Not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't work hard, but because they can't afford the $360,000 entry fee to learn it. Frame that gap, it is exploited everywhere. The people who know charge markups of 1,000 to 10,000% to people who don't. And the people who don't, they have no idea they're being overcharged because they don't know what questions to ask. Seems like a simple problem. They don't know what questions to ask. I want you to watch this diagram. It shows how knowledge flows through the system we're building. A student learns frameworks through cultural examples. The student applies frameworks to real problems. The system records what worked, what didn't. Knowledge returns to the platform. Next student learns from patterns of success. The gap closes, one student at a time. There's a reason I keep talking about keeping people on the horse. It comes from history. Before the stirrup was invented, cavalry was almost useless. You could ride a horse into battle, sure, but the moment you tried to fight from it, you'd fall off. Then someone invented the stirrup, a simple piece of metal hanging from each side of the saddle, and suddenly, cavalry became the most dominant force in the battlefield for 1,000 years. The stirrup didn't make the horse faster. It didn't make the horse stronger. It just kept the rider from falling off. That's what we're building for AI. Not a smarter AI, not a faster AI, a stirrup. A governance layer that keeps you mounted on that horse through the entire workflow, that makes sure you're learning the frameworks, not just getting the answers. Most people trying to use AI right now, they're riding without stirrups. They're making plans they can't execute. They're generating ideas they don't understand. They're falling off. We're building the stirrup. And in the next episode, I'm going to show you exactly how it works. I'm going to walk you through a real example, something simple, something you can picture. I'm going to show you how the system keeps you from falling off, how it teaches you, while it helps you. Because there's a third future, one where you don't get replaced, one where you don't fall into that gap, one where you stay on that horse, where you learn, where you own what you create. That future isn't guaranteed, but it is possible, and we're building it. Stay with us.